Good morning. It's a little chilly out here today, 40s. Okay, most people start a spiritual journey with improving oneself, standing in their power and energy. Okay, I mean, I've done this, and I've come back to God. But one of the things I learned within that journey is the journey doesn't stop. Too many stop. They get to a certain point and they stop. That's kind of hard for me to understand. Or they get to a point of, oh, I know all the answers, and they don't. Now, let's take Christians, if you will. And I do consider myself a Christian, but I use that term loosely because, see, most Christians are judgmental. They will argue about the stupidest things. In other words, a passage, a verse, pre-trib, post-trib, all these things, which is insignificant because those arguments are of self, of I know, this is how I was told. This is what I believe. And that's just it. You know, you have to see it from all sides, and you have to welcome those sides. And this is where Christianity faults. And it kind of comes from the hierarchy of the churches, if you will. How they're taught. Okay, many only go with the Bible. Period, done, over. That's all we need. And I can see that to a certain extent. But if you're a Christian, why wouldn't you want to know the Torah, the Talmud, all these things, even the Quran? Then let's talk about what the bullshit term apocrypha, okay, not canon. Anytime a church tries to steer you away from some kind of text, I have a problem with. And here's where I'm going with this. Okay, there's decades prior, even centuries, they would give the term to mostly women, but men also, the mystics, people that carried the stigmata, people that, tales of levitation of the saints. And, you know, originally the church back in the 15th century, they would promote these things. In other words, look how, you know, your journey of godliness, what it can lead to. And then they turned into the Pharisees because they couldn't control, or what they couldn't control, they hid. Why would they do that? Why would they hide these nuns, these people? Why would they discount them if they're true believers? You have to ask yourself, because they turned into the Pharisees. The Pharisees would lose control, would lose power, would lose authority, and look at someone that maybe has no training, or maybe is just an ordinary person. You see, that's just it. It's all within us all. Anytime you have a middleman, in my opinion, it's bad, it's wrong. Your relationship is with God. And as I've mentioned before, some of you all want to use creator, some of you all want to use source. Okay, we're arguing about a word because you don't want to use a certain word or not. That's just ridiculous. Let's stop right there and get rid of all that bullshit. Okay? But there is a difference between the meanings of those words. But getting back to this, the church has always hid things, just about every church. And then you have the separations of the faith, Pentecostals, the Protestants, different because of differences in beliefs that they stand so firm on that we don't want to be a part of you. We're different. They separate from one another. And ones that grow up in faith take that same view instead of exploring the other things. Let's just take the Book of Enoch, for instance. Okay, it's fairly popular. Most Christians will say it's not canon, it's bullshit, it's none of these things. Says the church. Try reading it for yourself. Try reading all the Apocrypha. All. I mean everything you can get your hands on. If you don't do that, you're limiting yourself. And you're seeing only what, quote, the Pharisees want you to see. I've seen preachers say, oh, the Bible, it's garbage, it's this, it's that. Says who? I mean, even he's mentioned in the Bible. There's something important to that. Now, there's several books of Enoch. All I'm saying is read it. Use your discernment, but that's where people don't have much understanding, discernment. But if you understand your faith, you would want to know the history of where it all came from. And that includes all the books, all the religions. Yeah, you should even understand some of the Buddhist mentalities and even the Hindu, the Vedic. You should read them. I don't discount anything that gives me understanding, whether it's of spirit or of earth. All I'm saying is educate yourself. But now let's get back to God and how the church hid all these mystics from us. The church eventually came to a point where they completely, they didn't look at it as a possibility. They looked at it from the skeptical point of view. Now, I understand that. I would be skeptical too. But see, they went in with the idea to disprove, not to prove. They would rather disprove it than prove it. And when they couldn't disprove it, it took many people in a, quote, political environment, if you will, a hierarchy, to say, hey, this person was the real deal, this person was the real deal, this person was inspired by God, or was affected by God. And it would take decades and sometimes centuries before they would be acknowledged. Why is that? Why is that? They preach God's faith, God's love, God's this. They talk about it all the time. But yet they don't want to prove what is there. Because, see, it messes with their hierarchy. And this goes to the point of, your spiritual journey. You start this journey in a given aspect. And you think it's of self. And it is to a point. It is to a point. You want to test your limits. You want to test these things. You want to understand things. And some people stop at a given point, like, I'm good. I got to this point. I'm good. It's good. All good. And then what they do is they twist and adopt a whole lot of things and try and wrap it all together. They want to include spiritual laws or laws of the universe into a Christian type faith, well, I think you can identify some of these things within that. But some of them scream, these don't belong together. You know? But yet they adapt them to their own. Well, this is this. They acknowledge them all, so they incorporate them into a given idea that has no name whatsoever. What's right and what's wrong? Well, that comes from your open mind, from your heart, of God. You know, God has given us everything. And that's what we don't understand. Do we think our strength comes from ourselves, or does it actually come from God? Does our understanding and wisdom come from ourselves, or clarity through God? Does our choice of love and who we love come through our own personal self, or through God? We don't give God a whole lot of credit on a lot of things. You know, I'm starting to understand how this all goes, and I don't know the answers. And no, I'm not talking about, well, Theogen wants to challenge me on the scriptures, and people put the comments, these scriptures, because they don't agree with my viewpoint. That's fine. And I don't have to agree with theirs, but I welcome the comments. But the bottom line is, you know, I'd say 90% of the Bible is a parable, the entire thing. And we can look at Jesus' life, Yeshua's life, as a parable. The entire thing. What can we learn from it? All angles. Not just looking from the outside, but looking from the inside out. That's the most important view that no one ever likes to go to. Getting back to the mystics generally had a gift from God. And it always came with some kind of suffering. But it was a lifestyle that people kind of chose, whether it was willingly or unwillingly, knowingly or unknowingly. But it also shows that they didn't stop. They didn't stop within their faith. They kept going. I mean, okay, let's take Enoch was in the Bible. Elijah was in the Bible. These were men of profound faith, and God took them to his own. Why isn't it taught that we should emulate those people? Why isn't that in the teachings? Even with Jesus, be more like Jesus. It's not really taught. It's told, but it's not emphasized. Jesus said, everything I can do, you will do, and more. But you have to have the faith to understand that, just like Peter walking on the water, he had to have faith. He doubted. And I'm not trying to just quote the Bible. Please understand that. But there are certain things that you have to understand that, you know, these parables and lines hit you. And you need to expand on them. You need to go into them deeply. You know, we had these solar flares the last couple of days, whatever. This massive solar flare. Look at the pretty lights. Look at the pretty lights. Why? You know, if people put the energy into God that they put into politics, into the images, into their own self, if they just put in the work in prayer, meditation, whatever you want to call it, that they put more faith in the outside world than they do in their own faith. And that's what the people don't realize. They put more value, more commitment into the outside world instead of into their faith. So my question is, have you stopped? Did you stop seeking? Did you stop exploring? Because quite frankly, there is no stopping. You can't read the Bible and it's done and it's over. You just can't. There's always more within, always more in that Bible, always more in those books, always more in those parables, always more in the Apocrypha. Because whether the church says it or not, the Apocrypha is supporting of the early days in its history. And if you discount it, then you're not being honest. Anyway, just some thoughts. Love to all.